guys? Welcome to Better Bachelor. My name is Joker with a face for radio and a voice for print. Hero, villain, either way, depending on what side of the fence you fall on, Julian Assange is finally free. I'm going to discuss just briefly who Julian Assange is, why this is kind of a big deal, and why a lot of people support him being released, and how our government says, oh, they're fine for whistleblowers and they're fine for people spilling the truth on the atrocities and the wrongdoings of other countries, of private citizens. But when you do it to the government itself, it will come after you with the full force of the law. Before we jump in immediately, two things. Remember, if you see a ball cap, it's going to be a news story. So like I've got and I'm going to mention this for a few more videos just because everybody doesn't watch every video I do. So I want to make sure they know what's going on. But if you see a ball cap, that means I'm going to be doing a news story. If you see traditional thumbnails like this, it means I'm going to be doing a women bad video. So that way you guys can know the difference between the two. And secondly, if you like me doing my reporting, please come over and support me at betterbachelor.locals.com. It's $5 a month. So first, Julian Assange, what's up with him? What happened? Why is this kind of a big deal? And this is from Reuters. And the reason why I chose Reuters is because Julian Assange specifically squealed on the U.S. government and released top secret documents on the government and what they specifically did to Reuters journalists. So that's why I selected to read the story from Reuters itself. What is WikiLeaks and why did it get Julian Assange in so much trouble? From Reuters, Julian Assange, founder of whistleblower media group WikiLeaks, is due to strike a plea bargain this week that would free him from jail and allow him to return home to Australia after a 14-year-long legal saga. They say, what is WikiLeaks? On its website, WikiLeaks says it's a multinational media organization that specializes in analyzing and publishing databases of censored or otherwise restricted materials involving war, spying, and corruption. It was founded by Assange in 2006 and lists several international media organizations among its co-publishers, research partners, and funders. It also says it is a not-for-profit organization that is funded through public donations. Quote, WikiLeaks is a giant library of the world's most persecuted documents, Assange said of the organization in an interview with German newspaper Der Spiegel in 2015. We give asylum to those documents, we analyze them, we promote them, and we obtain more. The most controversial leaks by WikiLeaks featured classified U.S. military documents, so they weren't top secret, just classified. That's on my mistake. And videos from the war it waged in Iran and Afghanistan in the early to mid-2000s that it said highlighted issues such as harm of prisoners in U.S. custody, human rights violations, and civilian casualties. U.S. authorities said the leaks were reckless, damaged national security, and endangered the lives of agents. Assange's many supporters said the site upheld free speech, and attempts to prosecute him were an assault on journalism. I think two things can be true at once. I think the U.S. authorities were embarrassed. I think they did not like some of the video clips that were released. And I think also that it could damage national security. So two things can be true at once. That's my kind of take on it. What did WikiLeaks publish that caused such a stir? In April 2010, WikiLeaks released a video showing a 2007 U.S. helicopter that attacked and ended a dozen people in Baghdad, including 2 Reuters news staff. In June, a U.S. military specialist named Bradley Manning was arrested for releasing the classified video. 3 months later, WikiLeaks released more than 91,000 documents, most of which were secret U.S. military reports about the war in Afghanistan. That was followed in October by the release of some 400,000 classified U.S. military files chronicling the Iraq War from 2004 to 2009. The releases were the largest leak of their kind in U.S. military history. Later that same year, WikiLeaks released thousands of U.S. diplomatic cables that included candid views of foreign leaders and blunt assessments of security threats. These included cables from the former king of Saudi Arabia, Abdullah, repeatedly urging the United States to attack Iran's nuclear program, and others about China directing cyber attacks on the United States. In the meantime, Assange was fighting against an order by a Swedish court to detain him as a result of an investigation into allegations of inappropriate sexual activity with women. He was arrested in December of 2010 in Britain on a European warrant. Assange denied the allegations and said from the outset that it was a pretext to extradite him to the United States to face charges over the WikiLeaks releases. Now, they don't mention this particularly in the story, but those charges were eventually dropped against him. So, whether they were true or not, they were eventually dropped, which leads a lot of people to believe that they were made up just to try to get him extradited to the U.S. so he could be thrown in jail and or ended. In 2011, WikiLeaks released thousands of previously unpublished U.S. diplomatic cables from its cache of more than 250,000 State Department reports. So this also brings to light, hey, how secure is our intelligence apparatus if so many documents can get leaked? Who is the people that leaked this stuff? How did they get clearance? How did they get access to this stuff? They say, was WikiLeaks the only online activist? No, a loose group of cyber activists supporting WikiLeaks launched a spate of online attacks on organizations seen as hostile to the site. And then after Assange's arrest in 2010, they started spreading the leaked documents far and wide online. Another group of activists operating under the name Anonymous temporarily brought down websites of credit card giants MasterCard and Visa after they had stopped processing donations to WikiLeaks. Today, the site says it accepts donations in cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. So there's kind of a background of Julian Assange, what happened. I'm going to drop in the video that they released. It's not very long. This is directly from YouTube. If you're on YouTube, I'm not going to show this because in usual YouTube fashion, I have to put in the video description that there is visualization of war and people being ended, which will demonetize and deboost this video. So I'm not going to show this. I'm going to show it on Hulu. I'm going to show this over on Rumble, and I'll show this over on Locals. You guys there can see it. It's 2 minutes and 22 seconds long. I'll just drop it in here so you can see it. And then we'll get, and for you on YouTube, if you want to see it, you got to jump to the other sites. So we'll continue on after that video. All right, so here's the current updated news story from Insider Paper. Julian Assange to plead guilty in a deal with U.S. authorities. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has agreed to plead guilty in U.S. court to revealing military secrets in exchange for his freedom, ending his years-long legal drama, according to court documents released Monday night. Assange, who had been in custody in Britain, will plead guilty to single count of conspiracy to obtain and disseminate national defense information, according to the document filed in the court of Northern Mariana Islands, a U.S. territory in the Pacific. WikiLeaks reported early Tuesday morning British time that Assange is free and had left the country. He's scheduled to appear Wednesday morning local time in the U.S. territory. Assange is expected to be sentenced to 62 months in prison with credit for the 5 years he served in prison in Britain. This means he could be returned to his native Australia without any more additional time served. During his ordeal, Assange became a hero to free speech campaigners around the world and a villain to those who thought he endangered U.S. national security and intelligence sources by revealing secrets. Let me put a little caveat in here. Part of the reason people are speculating that he's been pardoned and or time served and he's going to sign guilty is because if he was released by President Trump, it would be a feather in the cap for President Trump, while being released under Biden, it can be a, quote, feather in the cap or a good thing done by President Biden. But also, because so much of this release of statements and the things that he reported on were between 2008 and 2016, that fell under President Barack Obama's presidency. And so if Trump bailed him out, he might be able to get information from him that might put the Democrats in a bad light. However, by being released by Biden, part of his deal, his I don't know if they even say plea deal, but he is pleading guilty. Part of that could be, hey, okay, we're going to release you, time served, but you have to agree to not release any more documents, not talk to anybody ever again about anything that you've seen, and if you do so, we will jail you indefinitely forever. And that way they can finally get him to shut up and can start bury some of this stuff back under the rug if he knows additional things that he didn't publish. That is, I don't have any proof of this, but this is what many are speculating as to why President Biden is releasing him at this point in time. The British government approved his extradition in June 2022. In the latest twist to the saga, 2 British judges said in May that he could appeal against his extradition to the United States. The appeal was to address the question of whether, as a foreigner on trial in America, he would enjoy the protections of freedom of speech accorded under the First Amendment to the Constitution. The plea deal was not entirely unexpected. President Joe Biden has been under growing pressure to drop the long-running case against Assange. In February, the government of Australia made an official request to this effect, and Biden said he would consider it, raising hopes among Assange supporters that his ordeal might end. So all that's coming to an end. Me personally, I do think if you look at what the United States is, what it does to foreign adversaries or even foreign supposedly allies, right now it's come out, the United States, it's come out and they said, hey, Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Now, why Russia would blow up its own pipeline instead of just turning off the flow of gas if it wanted to, that has a lot of people asking questions. And the United States has said, no, it's definitely Russia. What if it comes out later on through leaks and other things that it was actually the United States that did it or NATO that did it? All of a sudden, that gives people another reason to say, hey, our government's lying to us. That was a false flag. We don't trust what our government is doing, right? So they want to keep that under wraps. And leaks like this can get out there and make the United States look very bad. But in the same token, United States now currently is blaming Israel and saying that what they're doing is wrong because there are civilians being ended, even if accidentally, through fighting back against the Palestinians and the head organization over there. Well, it makes the United States look like a hypocrite when the United States is very up in arms over what Israel's doing, but then turning around and in leaks from 2006 and 2008 shows the United States not only doing very similar, but in many cases something worse. And that's why a lot of people say, hey, we need these whistleblowers. But from the military standpoint, I was in the military 4 years. I do understand that, war is hell. And a lot of times you have to do things that you don't necessarily want everybody to know you're doing so you can win. And yes, it may be not exactly great. It may not even be exactly legal. There's a reason why war is said to be hell, because a lot of times you have to do something. Now, in the video clip that I played, you can hear contractors and military agents laughing after gunning down a bunch of people, some of whom are supposedly innocent civilians. It's not a good look. So I think both things can be right. You do want people to know the truth. You do want people to know what your military is up to and what's going on, but you have to do so that protects the people and our governments that are doing these clandestine operations. It is a tough call. I think I actually agree with both, and it's not fence sitting. It's just I think people need to know what's going on, but you need to protect assets and security and things of the United States so that we can't be counterattacked or we can't have something detrimental happen to us. So again, two things can be happening at once. And most of this happened under Obama's legacy. And this is from Long Island Press. Obama's legacy, a historic war on whistleblowers. Now from here, I'm going to be reading less about Assange and more about Snowden and some of the other whistleblowers that have basically come out and shown that the United States government is doing some things that are not so good, and how Obama, the president that didn't have any bad stories about him or any controversies, how Obama was actually the worst at attacking journalists and people that wanted to out the government. So it's taken this video in a further direction, same direction, but it's a little bit further if you guys are interested in hanging out to hear that. Now, of course, in the beginning of the whole article, this is right after President Trump was elected. They have to attack President Trump for the first like 5 or 6 paragraphs. So I'm just going to skip all that stuff because this was written in January 14th of 2017, right after Trump was elected. So of course they have to. It is a liberal-leaning outfit website, so they do have to first get off their chest how yes they're going to say something bad about Obama, but Trump's also bad, so they have to get that off their chests, of course, so they're not canceled. They say, as for Obama's record, here's what history will show. In his 8 years in office, the Obama Justice Department spearheaded 8 Espionage Act prosecutions, more than all U.S. administrators combined. Journalists were also caught in the crosshairs. Investigators sought phone records for Associated Press journalists, threatened jail to investigative reporter for the New York Times, and named a Fox News reporter a co-conspirator in a leak case. In Texas, a journalist investigating private defense contractors became the focus of a federal prosecution and was initially charged for sharing a hyperlink containing hacked information that actually had already been made public. Those Espionage Act cases included the trial of Chelsea Manning, who was held in solitary confinement for nearly 1 year prior to her military trial, prompting a condemnation from the UN Special Rapporteur on intentional harm. And I'm dancing around these words a little bit because if I just drop them out, YouTube people don't know what I'm talking about. So if I try to change the language a little bit, I don't have to drop out the words, but those of you on YouTube can still understand what I'm talking about, right? But it includes putting a cloth over your face and pouring water on it and waterboarding you, right? So they went after Chelsea Manning because she wouldn't divulge her sources. The absolute twisted passion with which the administration under Obama's leadership has pursued whistleblowers is just appalling, says Norman Solomon, executive director of the Institute for Public Accuracy and co-founder of RootsAction.org. And as far as I can tell, the administration is unrepentant in that process. There's just no other administration that comes close. Now, this isn't to per se attack, Democrats or Republicans on this stuff, because, what Snowden and Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning did. Some of it was under the Republican when Bush was in office, 2006. Obama didn't get office until 2008. So a lot of this came under the Bush presidency. So it was both Republicans at the end of the Bush presidency and Obama during most of his presidency that they went after these whistleblowers. But ironically, Obama famously said, we're going to shut down Guantanamo Bay. We want whistleblowers to come forward and let people know if there's problems with things. And ironically, he's the one that went after the whistleblowers the hardest. They say journalists' concerns about their threatened rights has become such a hot-button issue that Obama's first U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder had to publicly affirm that they would be spared from the confines of a metal cell under his watch. He said, He said, as long as I'm Attorney General, no reporter who is doing his job is going to jail, Holder said. The frequency of Espionage Act cases under Obama has earned him the reputation of waging war on whistleblowers. New York Times reporter James Risen has called Obama the greatest enemy to press freedom in a generation. Damning words indeed. In 2015, the United States was about to drop out of the top 50 countries in the Reporter Without Borders annual Press Freedom Index, sliding 29 points since 2009 when Barack Obama took office. In the International Watchdog Organization's report, RWB cited the ongoing conflict with the whistleblowers for the decline. The United States regained 8 spots in 2016, obviously when Trump was elected, but the home of the Bill of Rights finds itself in the same company as 2 African nations, Burkina Faso and Botswana, and Slovenia, where RWB notes Anyone who feels offended or insulted by a newspaper article can demand the publication of a correction in the same position in the newspaper. As RWB explained, U.S. media freedom enshrined in the First Amendment to the 1787 Constitution has encountered a major obstacle: the government's war on whistleblowers who leak information about its surveillance activities, spying, and foreign operations, especially those linked to counterterrorism. Now, this is kind of important because if you wonder why it seems that during the Obama administration, so many news agencies stopped reporting the truth and started reporting what the government wanted them to report, this is probably a big reason for it. It's not that they're just all in on the left. They know that, especially during Obama's tenure, that yes, he's on the left, and if you report anything that is very anti-government, they might come after you. So it's always a good idea to stay on the side of the government if you know they're going to come after you. And who's primarily been in the government? Well, Obama was in from 08 to 2016. And then Trump got in, and they know that Republicans are not very litigious. Republicans really don't go after journalists legally because other journalists would be reporting about it. And then they would, of course, all call out the Trump administration as he's a warmonger, he's evil, he's doing all these horrible things to journalists, and the attack on free speech. But when Obama did it, because so many Democratic outlets felt that they agreed with the democratic principles, many of them just decided, hey, okay, well, we're going to just, no matter what, we're going to just report on what the left wants us to report, and that way we don't get in trouble anymore. And so when we see this large lurch off to the left, and why you didn't see many negative stories about Obama, but all of a sudden you see all these negative stories about Trump, it's both A, most of the journalists are very left-leaning now, and B, they know they can report on Trump, and if Trump goes after any of them, they will all scream about it, where when they went after Obama on a few things, he shut it down real quick and hard, and the other ones felt like they didn't want to take the risk. And again, they agreed with many of the Democratic positions. This explains, I think, in many ways, why news agencies lurched to the left so quickly. The Obama administration has deployed the Espionage Act against whistleblowers with such devastating effect that it punishes leakers who believe they're acting in the public good and creates a chilling effect from national security agencies on down, a show of force that may make potential whistleblowers think twice about disclosing information, according to rights groups and whistleblower advocates. The Obama administration has presided over the most draconian crackdown on national security and intelligence community whistleblowers in U.S. history, said Jesslyn Radek, a whistleblower herself and a national security attorney, at an event last February in Washington, D.C., to support the imprisoned whistleblower Jeffrey Sterling, a lawyer and former CIA employee. The Justice Department has used an antiquated Espionage Act as a bludgeon to threaten, intimidate, silence, and imprison whistleblowers for allegedly mishandling classified information. Even customary access that White House correspondents had enjoyed for decades has been disrupted, according to the scathing 2013 Committee to Protect Journalists report. In the past, we would often be called into the Roosevelt Room at the beginning of the meeting to hear the president's opening remarks and see who's in the meeting. And then we could talk to some of them outside on the driveway afterwards, ABC News White House correspondent Ann Compton, who's covered every president since Gerald Ford, told the report's authors. This president has wiped all that coverage off the map. He's the least transparent of the 7 presidents I've covered in terms of how he does his daily business. Now, if you look at the Biden administration, they're doing something very similar. You know, Biden has clearly many times stepped up to the podium, and there's video of him saying multiple times, they told me not to do that. They told me not to say that. Okay, let's see, who am I supposed to call on next? There's many things that the Biden administration is doing similarly to people in the press. And there's been a couple cases where people called out the I forget what her name is, but the woman that does the journal stuff or the press readings for the day, They've called her out on some things, and after that, they've not been invited back or not allowed in to the press releases. So they're still, doing it to some degree, which is if you're controversial or you ask tough questions to the president that haven't been authorized, his aides just come in and say, okay, thank you, everybody, we're done. Okay, get out, get out, get out. And he never has to answer the questions. They're doing the same thing for Biden. Now, something that you'll notice, too, is if you look currently, we've got the House, we've got the Senate, we've got the presidency. The House has called forth a couple of whistleblowers that came forward about Boeing's current actions, and many of which are not falling under safety regulations and are improper for multiple reasons. Two whistleblowers that were very excited to come before Congress to talk about what's going on at Boeing. Both of them had their lives ended. Both of them were unalived, supposedly by their own hands. At least one of them was by their own hands. If you look at and I forget the gentleman's name, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but the analyst that's going through Google's data to show how that they're manipulating what web pages people see and what information they're seeing, so that if you do a search on Hillary Clinton and her crimes, nothing comes up but positive things. And if you search things that are positive about President Trump, only negative things come up. There's a guy that I believe he was with Harvard. I wish I could remember his name, but I wasn't expecting to go down this rabbit hole. I wish I could remember his name, but he came forward talking about these things, and mysteriously his wife died. And he had people warning him, hey, you may want to drop this because they may come for you next. So it's not just the Department of Justice. It's not just the agencies. It's that more and more people are realizing that if you decide to talk about something the government doesn't want, not only will they come after you for legal reasons under the Espionage Act, they may come and actually just end you. Seth Rich is another example. They may just end you, and before, there's going to be a lot of questions initially, but they know over time people are going to forget and the world moves on, and no one ever looks into the people and their mysterious endings, even after they've said, I am not going to self-delete. If something happens to me, please understand it is not me. Please look into it. And then mysteriously, oopsie, they're unalived in some mysterious way. And then our government agencies are kind of like, yeah, whatever. We're not going to look into that. This is very controversial stuff, whether it's Snowden, whether it's Julian Assange. If there's things that the public should be told that our government is lying to us, that our government is spying on America, that our government is doing things that are against what they've been elected and are legal to do, I think people have a right to know this stuff. But when trying to release it and when trying to report on it, many times these whistleblowers are shut up and or completely silenced, a la Mr. Epstein. If you look at him in prison, Jeffrey, that is, if you look at him, he supposedly ended himself at the end of an electrical cord, and yet all the broken bones and things in his neck showed that he had been expired of strangulation, not an electrical cord. And even the coroner's report was changed and modified, and in a poof of smoke, somebody that could have outed a lot of very powerful people in the United States, the investigation is over. And a judge decided to seal, and I forget her name, Ghislaine Maxwell, that's her name. She's still in prison, and she's come out and said many things about who was in charge of all this stuff and what's going on, and a judge sealed that information because it would be too important or too damaging to let the names out. Well, yeah, those names are damaging. That's why we want them released. These people should not be in charge of things. They should not be allowed to walk free. They should not allowed to be left in our government. And it was a big deal at the time. Everybody was talking about, what's going to get released? And the judge sealed it, and a few people complained, and then the new thing popped up. The next thing. If you ever notice, it's like a bunch of little fires popping up all over the place, and people are running around with like chickens with their heads cut off trying to put out the fires. Well, that's done on purpose, because if you can keep making so many things pop up in the news to keep up journalists have to chase after the next new story, leaving the old story behind. And so Ghislaine Maxwell and, her information that a judge has sealed, well, the left-leaning organizations aren't reporting on that anymore, and the right-leaning ones have moved on to new things because there's not enough interest or not enough people are talking about it. That's what's going on with these federal agencies. I'll leave a link to this below because it's getting very long and I don't want to bore you guys. But these are the things that we forget about and we wash over to where people forget like how many rights we've actually lost. And in many cases, why myself and many others say Obama is actually the worst president we've had in probably 100 years, if not ever. And the minute you say that, people will automatically say that, you're blaming him because of the color of his skin, when in reality, he's done more to wash away the freedoms and the exposing of government problems and letting us know what's going on in the government more than any president, up to and including Nixon in many ways. He sent drones after innocent people. He's done a lot to really erode, as they say in this, the First, the Fourth, and the Fifth Amendment rights of Americans. And it's very hard to get those back so long as the government machine is still in power. You really need to completely clean out all these administrative agencies and many of the politicians that have been in office for 30, 40, 50 years. And that's why many people are very much on board with America First and somebody like President Trump and some of these other congressmen and senators that are not in on the war machine. They want a smaller government. They want to tear down these agencies. This is a big reason why. That's why the American First movement in the United States on the Republican side is getting so much momentum. And in many cases, it means that quote-unquote traditional Republicans, which are really what many consider as rhinos, Republican in name only, are struggling right now in many elections because people are tired of the same old, same old. They want some changes. They see what can be done when the government truly does work for the people and not the machine and not for the warmongers. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out, but it all begins with getting the right people in place that'll call out the machine, that'll change the agencies, that will correct some of the problems we have in the United States. All right, guys, I will leave it there. Again, if you like my journalism, you like my reporting, please join me on betterbachelor.locals.com. Become a supporter today. It's $5 a month. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee, and hopefully you'll find enough value in it that you appreciate it. I'll leave it there. We'll see you in the next one.